Toys! He shouted angrily, thrusting the box lid back down and standing up quickly. Unfortunately, he hadn't considered how near his head was to the roof in this part of the attic, but realised very quickly when he hit it. "Ow, frog spit!" he shouted, clenching his teeth and rubbing his head. Well, this has been a waste of time, he then muttered to himself before returning to the beam and picking up the lantern again. He sighed and tried so hard to figure out where he'd seen that iron sword before, but nothing came. He'd looked everywhere in this house, checked every nook and cranny, and now he had done the attic, he knew it wasn't here. It would bother the young man forever, but this time he just had to admit that he couldn't find it. It may appear in time, but for now, this adventure was put on hold. Seb shrugged his shoulders and shook his head. On a long out-breath, he realised that he just had to let go. It could send him mad otherwise. The release actually felt quite nice to him, and he looked forward to getting a good hearty breakfast into his belly as the rising sun pierced light through the small cracks in the roof. Seb smiled and started shuffling back along the beam to the attic hatch. Just as he started, a bat fluttered close to his head, which caused Seb to quickly turn and raise his lantern to scare it away. "Shoo! Shoo!" he shouted, waving the lantern randomly. Just as he felt comfortable that the bat had gone, he went to turn back, but something in the rough brickwork at the end of the attic caught his eye. The young man then tilted his head and squinted his eyes a bit to get a better look. Strange. Seb then shuffled quickly towards the end of the attic, raising his lantern to fill the area with light. And there it was, scratched into the huge rough brick wall, a big circle with an eye and a sword sitting in the middle of it. She stood beside the pond with long blonde hair tied and reaching halfway down her back. Her purple robe caught the light of the rising sun and glistened as it rose over the mountain off in the distance. It was a warm morning with the smell of lavender from the nearby forest filling the air. Birds awoke with song as the early morning mist began to evaporate with the rising sun. Her reflection looked back at her from the calmness of the pond's surface. Not an old lady by any means, she still held a lot of wisdom and life experience in her face. It has been said when Darius smiled, she smiled for 1,000 past souls, but when she frowned, even the gods winced. Darius whispered the mantra and asked the question, "O great beings of nature and elemental spirits, please describe to me as to why the energy is moving through the ether. Why are the mystics feeling a great movement in the field?" She waited for a brief moment before adding, "And how is the symbol connected?" She stood silent, birds chirped from the forest. And again with more energy, "O great beings of nature and elemental spirits, please describe to me as to why the energy is changing through the ether. Why are the mystics feeling a movement in the field?" Staring at her reflection in the pond, Darius suddenly bent backwards and then shot forwards onto her knees. She stayed like this for a while, head bowed down before raising her head slowly to look into the pond once more. Her blue eyes had turned into a sharp emerald green colour and glowed with natural magic. The pond stayed calm, but as she looked into it, it wasn't her reflection she saw staring back, but vague, moving images. Darius tried to remember them as they came, but it was difficult in this heightened state, and they moved so fast. She would normally feel quite tired after an episode like this, but the young mystic had to try harder this time. More information needed to be summoned because this king wasn't the type to take second best. She wasn't bothered about his threats of death to her, as she understood that she was spirit and soul capsulated in body and would return to the natural realm after death. It was her family Darius was bothered about. They didn't have the same spiritual understanding as her, and right now they were very, very scared. The king had locked them in the dungeons. Sometimes Darius did wish she could return to the natural realm, because then she could wreak her revenge through spirit. One opportunity against this bully, that's all she needed. But for now, she'd have to play his games. Darius knew this information could lead to a lot of people being hurt. She felt it. But she had to do something to save her family. In one powerful and surprising motion, the mystics saw it all. The vision lasted longer than most, but it was so vivid. The symbol, a sword, wizards, FlowerDawn, Sebastian Foxtrot, the tavern, the Foulhorn Riders, blood, lots of blood, screaming, a burning village, hatred, greed. Darius screwed her face in anger and the vision stopped suddenly. She had lost her flow with the energy, and those green eyes turned back to blue. Through the tears, she muttered, "And Cornbeak, you bastard." She stood for a while to find her composure before making her way up the cobbled stairs to the palace to share the information with the king.
"Are you ready for this?" SilverWind said. "Remember, be apologetic."
Korak rubbed his head.
"I feel like fat badgers are dancing in my head," he moaned. I know, me too. But we have to do this right, you understand. Do you have the cake?" Yes, go in.
SilverWind then produced a large iron key and put it into the lock of the partially hidden wooden door. The rounded old door sat in a hillside with bracken and ivy hanging over it, somewhere that could only be seen if a person was looking for it. Magic could normally be used to hide a home if need be, but SilverWind hadn't been too successful with that in the past. The wizard turned the key and a thick door creaked open. They then sheepishly walked into the large room, which had a tiled floor and a big wooden table sitting in the middle of it. A bookcase sat at one end of the room with a couple of comfy chairs opposite. At the other side of the room was a fireplace with the charred, cold remains of a fire still inside it. Next to this were two small cages, each with a small green creature that currently had their backs turned to the wizards. The place was silent. SilverWind winced. Shutting the door softly, he then beckoned to Korak to give him a piece of cake.
"Peg, Glop, we are so sorry,"
SilverWind said whilst walking to the cages with a handful of cake. He tried to make eye contact with both the creatures by walking into the gap at the side of the cages, but all they did was shuffle around to the other side, arms crossed, very, very annoyed.
"Cake?"
"Bugger cake! Stick cake up your bum, snotface!"
a little voice from Peg's cage said.
"We only meant to go out for a little drink, but we got sidetracked. Please forgive us,"
he added. Glop turned round, arms still crossed, and stared at the wizard like a teacher stared at a naughty schoolchild who hadn't done his homework again.
"No forgive, snotface, none!"
the little imp squeaked before turning to face the wall again.
"Oh dear, SilverWind," Korak said. "I think we're going to need more cake," he added. "Oh, yes,"
SilverWind muttered, walking back to the table.
"Well, as soon as they forgive us, the sooner we can get out searching again." "Oh, I agree, SilverWind. I believe I'm hooked." "Oh, me too, old chap. Look at all of this history in front of us."
The large wooden table had a variety of old items on it that had been dug up by the two wizards with the help of their imps. Buckles, coins, buttons, swords, and lots of other objects were laid out neatly on the tabletop. Some items had small pieces of paper beneath them with a description of what that item was and the date it could have been used.
"Each of these items, each with a story to tell. It's absolutely fantastic. I've been trying to tell you two about my story for ages now, and you don't bloody listen,"
a little voice said. SilverWind sighed and looked down at a little head that sat on a gold coin.
"We do listen,"
SilverWind explained.
"It's just sometimes you don't shut up."
"Well, that's bloody lovely, isn't it?"
the coin said.
4,000 years in the ground and now I get treated like this. Sometimes, just sometimes, I wish you had never dug me up. Better company with worms and ants in mud. I used to be something back in the day. Wouldn't have to put up with simpletons like you two. Oh no, I spent most of my time in the pockets of kings and princes, not peasants like you. Do you know that I was the coin flipped, which made the decision to go to war with the Lochian realm? I made that decision, me. But do you listen? Oh no, you two!
SilverWind flipped the coin to the other side of the table, and a little head carried on complaining with a muffle underneath.
"Some things should stay lost," Korak muttered. "Oh, I agree," SilverWind replied. "Who's going to do the dance then? Pretty sure it was me last time and you played guitar, Korak," he added. "I forget," Korak replied.
"Flip for it," SilverWind said, reaching for the gold coin.
"Heads or tails?"
"Tails, definitely," Korak replied. SilverWind then flipped the coin, which screamed, "Ah!" as it left his finger before landing on the floor with a thud. "Tails it is then," Korak said as the head on the coin screamed and shouted into the rug beneath. "I'll get the guitar and you do the dance," he said whilst walking into his quarters to fetch the instrument.